How's it going, everyone? My name is Michael SK, and welcome back to Umineko When They Cry, episode 5. And right now we're kind of talking about Kraus. I guess trying to bring him back down to earth, if you will, because he has recently seemed like a massive idiot, but as those in the comments have, stated, and I totally agree with them, Kraus is still very much human, and we can see that out of the flashback that we saw at the end of the previous video. He is very much human. He definitely cares, but he's also put in a very awkward position, and he always has. His perspective on things is very twisted because of Kinzo. I'm definitely putting the blame on Kinzo for that one. So, yeah, we're just having a little conversation between Natsuhi and supposedly Beatrice, but that could also be literally nobody because Beatrice does not exist. And we need to start, slamming that to the ground yet again that, she is not actually here. Kinzo is not alive. It's just that that's the, twisted perception that everybody now has here in order to cover it up. Yeah, we've heard about that before. Yeah, we saw how well that went in episode 2.
この度の親族会議における使用人たちへの指示や采配は見事であった。金蔵が何時にどこにいて、何をして何を残したか、それらを見事に共有させ、矛盾なく組み上げた。それらの緻密な計画書は、高度な魔法陣のそれと同じ美しさがあったぞ。
To make it look like Kinzo actually existed and was living life his own way, she had written his schedule for the day down to the finest detail and made the servants follow it to the letter. When did he meet whom and where, and what did he leave them? And when did he do what and where and what changed? As a result, even though the relatives never saw Kinzo even once, they hadn't suspected in the slightest that he had not been there. Ava and the rest truly believed that Kinzo had just happened to be walking through the hall when he heard them talking about the inheritance and went into a rage. Everything had gone just as Natsuhi's plan had predicted down to the finest detail. And the cooperation by the servants had also worked smoothly down to the finest detail. Honestly, with Kinzo not, being alive, if we go back to episode 1, there was that whole, scandal with his ring that he utilizes whenever he's, sealing an envelope. Obviously, that is no longer in Kinzo's possession. It didn't ever have to be. It probably wasn't. It probably isn't right now, a whole year prior to those events.
その緻密さと意志が絶対の成功を呼ぶ。どうやらそなたは魔女としてはラムダデルタ教の一派らしいな。それを魔法と自覚したならば、いつでも魔女見習いを名乗れるレベルだ。それを魔法と呼ぶなら、熊沢あたりはさしずめ、仮病の魔女ですね。
Haha, well, about Kumasawa.
忙しい日に限って腰痛で休むと連絡があります。毎年、親族会議の日にはいつもです。ああ、熊沢は違う。もっともっと高位の魔女であるぞ。正体知ったら驚くぞ。
Ain't that the truth, huh? Watching these two have their pleasant chat was another pair with steam rising from the black tea. However, the second pair was in a world that the first could not see, where golden roses bloomed. Yeah, she's not really with us here. It felt as though Beato muttered something. For the first time, it felt as though something had gotten through to her. Surely she had taken an interest in the black tea and felt like drinking it. Thinking this, Battler took Beato's cup and her hand, making her hold the cup. Well, glad that she's kind of participating, but yeah, she's really not all that here. Beato's eyes trembled sadly and her fingers shook, almost as though she couldn't even move her fingers as she wanted to, and was mourning the fact that she could no longer enjoy the tea she had once loved by her own power. That's how she looked. So Battler put his hand on Beato's, grabbed hold of the teacup, and lifted it to her lips. Then, though it was only a single mouthful, Beato sipped. The days they had been locked in a killing fest with red swords and blue wedges already seemed like the distant past. Now, not only was Beato unable to do that, it was even difficult for her to make her body do as she pleased. Even just drinking a mouthful of black tea like this was hard.
どうだ、バラの匂いが素敵な紅茶だよね。口に合うか。
Of course, Beato did not respond.
どうしちまったんだ。これもまた作戦なんだろ。落ち込んでるふりをして後でバーッと驚かそうって作戦なんだろ。それが狙いならもう二度と同じ手には乗らねえからいい加減にしろ。お前がそんなざまじゃこっちも調子が狂うんだよ。なあ、そろそろ引っかかったなバーカってバカ笑いしてくれよ。どんなネタもあまり引っ張りすぎると笑えなくなるぞ。二番煎じなら特にな。笑ってくれ。あそこで夏日おばさんとお茶を飲みながらケラケラと笑ってるみたいに。
But that's not actually her. Just a game piece.
せめてニヤーっと笑うくらいはできねえのかよ。
二度とないわ。
Oh.
その子が笑うことはもう二度と。
Those sudden words were exceedingly cruel. What up, Bernkastel?
どうして二度となんて言える。ベアとの笑う権利を勝手に奪うな。
あら、赤で言った方がいい？
I shook my head furiously. Then, with an expression that didn't reveal her thoughts in the slightest, Bernkastel spoke while looking at Beato's face. And the word she used was completely incomprehensible to me.
おめでとう。
Congratulations.
何がだ。
ベアトがそのざまなのはあなたが勝ったからこその結果だからよ。
何を言ってやがる。
あなたはかつてのゲームで言ったわ。これは互いを苛む永遠の拷問だとね。そうよ、ベアトにとっても拷問だった。そしてその拷問ゲームにあなたは勝ったのよ。だからベアトの魂は殺され人形同然の屍になり果てた。
俺がベアトを殺したと言うのかよ。
勝敗はどちらか一方の勝とうとする意志がくじけた時に決まる。あなたとベアとの戦いという意味においてはすでに前回決着がついていたのよ。まああなたにとっては預かり知れぬうちにだろうけれども。
なら俺の勝利なのにどうしてゲームが終わらない。どうしてこのゲームがまだ続いている。
Because you never predicted anything, the mystery has not been solved.
その子の足首についてる足かせ、ラムダが施したルールなのよ。
Even if Beatrice tries to yield or gets discouraged or gives up, she isn't capable of stepping down from the game. That's the rule. Or maybe it's a curse. I'd probably argue a
かつ
curse.
て私はあなたをサポートしたわ。あなたには知覚できないだろうけど、あなたにとって有利な展開とヒントが与えられるように私はあなたに助力した。だから今あなたはここにこうしていられるのよ。覚えてる？
私に助けられたこと。
Burnkin still stares at me. It's true that I wasn't aware of it, but just maybe, I was saved by her.
同じようにラムダはベアトをサポートしてるわ。そして今度はベアトが屈しようとしている。だから今度はラムダが屈しないようにサポートしたわ。それが足かせ。投了を許さないことによってベアトをゲーム上救ったわ。
何をどう救ったってんだ。
本来ゲームは2つの終わり方があった。どちらかが負けを認めて投了するか、どちらかがチェックメイトでゲームに勝つか。ベアトはその前者に抵触しかけた。だからラムダはそれを潰し、敗北をギリギリのところで回避したの。ゲーム上は立派なサポートだわ。
So the only way this game can end now is if I win. At the very least, until I do win, this witch called Lambda Delta can probably try to buy time for Beato to make a comeback. But that'll just prolong Beato's suffering even more. Neither of us want that. Both Beato and I fought with all we had trying to win. The game repeated several times because we were both giving it everything we could muster. Then, that one time, we confronted each other head-on with all of our strength, and Beato acknowledged her loss. She said that she wanted me to end this game and entrusted everything to me. So Burnt Castille's words are the truth. She said it's my fault Beato's becoming a living corpse, or has become a living corpse. That is true. But it's something both of us wanted.
俺たちの勝負はもう決着している。なのにゲームは終わらない。だからベアトは俺に託したんだ。早く勝ってこのゲームを終わらせろってな。
Now that the game has been resolved, letting it continue any further means endless torture for Beato. Nothing more than a nightmare. I've got to give her a perfect checkmate, end this game in the truest sense, and let her rest in peace. I mean, this is, you know, I don't want to say it's payback necessarily. I feel like that's a little fucked up. But Battler's definitely been in a situation of torture ever since all of this started. Now it's just kind of, you know, come back around to her. For that reason, I'll keep fighting. But by continuing the game, Beato's eternal torture will continue. It felt as though I can only let her sleep peacefully by slowly strangling her to death.
もう俺には真実なんてどうでもいい気がしてきた。ベアトの気が済んだならもうゲームなんてどうでもいいだろ。ベアトは投了した。俺は魔女幻想の真実など捨ておいて家族と家に帰る。それでいいじゃねえか。
I mean, there is a bit of a contradiction here. By Battler caring about Beatrice here, you know, watching her get tortured and feeling, you know, sympathy for her, he's acknowledging her existence, and that's something that contradicts what he's actually trying to accomplish here. If only Lambda Delta hadn't placed the curse of that shackle on her, this battle would be over already. That's why I found it detestable. This game, which I can't finish without tormenting Beato more, is detestable.
何？真実に近づいたらベアトが苦しそうな表情を見せるようになったんで急に手心を加えたくなったの。なら好きなだけ手加減するといい。あるいはベアトに勝ちを譲ればいい。そして妹に孤独で悲惨な未来を無限に強い続ければいい。
そういうわけじゃねえ。
That's right. I have to return to for Ange's sake as well. I know this isn't the time to start feeling compassion for Beato.
ならきっちり殺しなさい。その魔女を。
Even though Beato was right there, Burnt Castille spoke without holding back.
あなたの目的はこの女を殺すことよ。
Yeah, something along those lines.
あなたは前回のゲームでベアトに壊れて口にしたわ。お前を殺すってね。
ああ、そうかもな。だがそれはお前にとやかく言われることじゃねえな。
知ってる？爪を剥ぐときはね、一気に剥いでくれた方がマシなのよ。あなたみたいに優しくおっかなびっくりと ぐりぐりもたもたと剥がれる方がよっぽど痛い。あなたのしてることの方がよっぽど拷問だと思うけど。
Man, what is with the fingernail pulling in the When They Cry series?
慈悲があるなら
Ryukishi really has way too much knowledge on the fingernail pulling.
それが殺すということよ。
余計なお世話だ。俺がこいつにどう引導を渡すかは俺が。お前もあのラムダデルタという魔女も関係ない。俺が殺す。他の誰にもそれは許さない。
その意志に変わりがないならいいわ。私はあなたにかけてるのだから。いい？決して忘れないことよ。このゲームに決着をつけない限り、あなたが解放されることは決してない。
Oh, I'm very much aware on that.
あなたにだってこのゲームを放棄することは許されないのだから。
分かってない。
ラムダの狙いは分かってる。ベアトと同じようにあなたにも繊維喪失させて、二人とも生き人形にしてこの世界を永遠に安定させることよ。そんなの嫌でしょ。私も困るわ。
お前の都合など知ったことか。だが俺はゲームを捨てない。ベアトとの戦いの責任を放棄しない。
目的が同じで嬉しいわ。
I will say, what Brinkesil just said really reminds me of kind of what came about the newer Higurashi anime, Go and Sotsu. I'm not going to talk about them or why, you know, what she said kind of reminds me of that. But I mean, come on. We know the similarities and all that with Brinkesil and Lambda Delta, who or whom they necessarily kind of connect to over on that side.
そしてそれは躊躇なくその子を殺せるということよね。
そうだ。
I have no way of knowing whether those words eased her pain or hurt her, but I can tell by the dull tingling in my chest that I surely believe I've hurt her. I have no way of knowing what the silent Beato feels. If I think I've hurt her, does that mean that she's actually been hurt? And if I didn't think I'd hurt her, would that mean that no one's gotten hurt because of me? Yeah, that was a bit of a loop. Thrown for a loop.
あそこで夏日とお茶を飲んでるベアトだけど大丈夫よね。
ああ、大丈夫だ。
金蔵の時と同じよ。ベアトリーチェなんて存在しない。あれは魔女の力を借りて危機を乗り越える妙案を思いついたと信じる夏日が生み出した偽りの魔女幻想。
Or something along those lines. Again, we gotta be really careful with what we're perceiving here.
二人が並んでお茶を飲んでるように見えるのは
It cannot be this simple,
ゲー
right?
ムマスターであり物語の語り手であるラムダデルタがそう解釈しているからなだけよ。夏日に対し一辺の愛も持たずに凝視できたならそんな幻想が見えたりはしない。だから私の目には夏日が一人ぼっちで黙々と紅茶を飲んでるようにしか見えないわ。
Without love, it cannot be seen. Because love is lacking, it cannot be seen.
あれは夏日が見せている妄想。あそこにベアトリーチェなど存在しない。
Which means we can kind of argue the same thing for Shannon, you know? She had tea once with Beatrice over on the coast, and I think Kanon also perceived seeing her, but maybe that was Shannon thinking that Kanon did not like her, or something along those lines. There's a lot of different ways that you can kind of, you know, spin things on how we originally saw things play out. I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of these events should never have happened, but what actually did? Beato mumbled softly. It was a small voice that made it sound like she was in pain. The thorn of Brinkesil's truth had stabbed her stabbed into her chest.
ああ、そうだろうな。お前の推理は正しいと思うぜ。だが、それをベアトの前で口にするな。
どこで口にしたって同じよ。ここはベアトの世界なんだから。
あとは、こいつを擁護するわけじゃねえが、夏日おばさんが本当に未知の人物 X、ベアトリーチェと名乗る人物とこうしてお茶を飲んでる可能性だってあるんだぜ。 この光景は1年前のものだろうが、この日の島の人数が赤き真実で示されてるわけじゃない。
That is actually a good point.
そうね。この日のロッケン島の人数についてはラムダも赤では語ってないわ。
なら夏日おばさんが本当にベアトリーチェと名乗る女とお茶を飲んだと主張することもできるんだぜ。俺にお前の説を否定できないように、お前だって俺の説を否定できないんだ。だからそこにいるベアトが幻想だと断じることもできないぜ。
ああ、猫箱理論。
Which has to exist in every single fucking visual novel.
それベアトには通用したかもしれないけど。
どうして？
だって夏日はそこで一人ぼっちで紅茶を飲んでるんだもの。
Oh, she's just gonna fucking say it. Wow. There was a violent sound of glass breaking, and the Beato who laughed happily and cracked jokes about Natsuhi's newlywed years was erased. A lonely wind blew, and the one person who remained on the bench drinking tea with a tired expression was Aunt Natsuhi, all by herself. I wonder... Oh shit. Beato groaned. I could see clearly that she was in anguish. Another illusion of the witch has been smashed, drawing Beato towards death. In short, this is what the battle to let Beato rest in peace is all about. A second ago, Brinka still likened our fight to the torture of tearing fingernails out. If I have to tear them out anyway, then my last bit of compassion towards Beato should be to minimize that pain. In other words, even if I want to minimize her pain, I still have to cause it. I have to accept that look of anguish on her face. And at the same time, I realized what a merciless thing the red truth was. Now for real. But I was gonna say, like, since episode 2, we've been told this statement, you know, without love it cannot be seen or whatever, and variations of it, I think. So the idea here, you know, that love or whatever you want to, you know, sprinkle onto that cake or dessert is what changes your perception of what's going on here. It was the same thing with Maria and her friends, quote unquote. And I mean, Kanon and Shannon, they also had this sort of deal. Shannon telling Kanon without love it cannot be seen, and he just straight up did not understand. But now it's all kind of coming together. Really, the idea is perception. Shannon was able to perceive things differently than Kanon. Natsuhi was able to perceive things a little differently probably than everybody else because of that statement. Probably the servants as well. But it's this whole, you know, grouped together ideology, this plan of everything going on as if somebody still existed. And maybe, just maybe, that magic does also exist, that there is a witch. And that's where we're at here. Maybe this entire time I shouldn't have been trying to go towards that statement, but away from it. We have to pull back the curtain. Right now, this rose garden, or in this rose garden, there's no one except Aunt Natsuhi. In other words, there are no observers except for Aunt Natsuhi. So if that lone observer were to say that she'd had some tea with Beato, no one should be able to refute that. If there's something no one can deny, doesn't that mean it's the truth? Aunt Natsuhi is enjoying the roses and drinking tea together with Beato. How could anyone have the right to mercilessly trample that pleasant moment?
赤き真実はまるで刃物だ。
Hell yeah, it is.
魔女と戦う上で時に推理を切られ、時に反撃の武器となる。
知ってるわよ。それが何？
みだりに使うな。刃物は使うべき時に使えば道具だが、悪意を持って使えば凶器でしかない。
True enough, Aunt Natsuhi wasn't really, you know, drinking tea with a witch. However, saying that with the red truth probably has nothing to do with our game. No, she was trying to make a point. Our game is the tale of October 1986. The 2 days of the crime give us more than enough time to injure each other, with our red and blue blades glistening.
これは魔女幻想じゃない。夏日おばさんのプライバシーだ。それを暴く権利なんて誰にもあるものか。
Yeah, but it leads up, you know? There's importance to this, Battler.
この場に魔女が実在して夏日とお茶を飲んだと認めてほしいの？あなた魔女を否定するんじゃなかったの
？1986年10月4日から5日の2日間のゲームについてはな。だがそのゲーム版の外についてまで俺は魔女の存在を問うつもりはねえぜ。そもそも悪魔の証明により魔女の否定は不可能だ。そしてこのゲームのルールに従い赤でそれを語るのもステイルメイトで禁じ手だ。赤き真実でさえ魔女の存在を否定はできねえんだぜ。
確かにまさかあなたに魔女の存在を語られるとはね。
I know, like, Battler, which is it, man? Come on.
さすがラムだ。バトラーを人間犯人説と魔女がいてもいいという気持ちのうまいこと中間に引っ張り出してきたわ。人間の心を操るのに本当に長けている。私ももっとあなたを応援しないとまずいわね。
お前らなど知ったことじゃない。消えろ。これは俺とベアとのゲームだ。お前たちに私はしない。
嫌よ。
何？
だって私もこのゲーム
Yeah, I can
楽
tell.
しんでるんだもの。
We can all tell. She's really gotten a little freaky here ever since the transition from the question to answer arcs, huh? Pernka still disappeared, leaving only that unpleasant laugh behind. After that, all that remained was Natsuhi, sipping tea all alone. Beato, her hand still on the teacup as she stared blankly at the surface of the liquid, and me.
ベルンカステルにラムダデルタか。ワルギリアはお前の友人と言ってたが、お前友人は選ぶべきだったな。いや、むしろ性悪なお前にはお似合いなのか。
It's always good to have a little bit of that, you know, weird balance. Beato didn't answer. Battler took Beato's hand, made her hold the cup again, and brought it to her lips. Beato made a quiet sound in her throat and drank another gulp. Well, she's not human, she doesn't necessarily have to function, but, you know. Then Natsuhi's lonely tea time ended. That truth, which was Natsuhi's alone and observed by no one else, had been defiled. In Natsuhi's world, surely, that tea party, which had been peaceful despite her annoyance at Beato for making fun of her too much, came to an end, and the two of them parted ways. However, in Natsuhi's exposed truth, she was all alone. Natsuhi tottered away. On the bench, only a single person's cup remained. Well, that got depressing. That got so depressing, but at the same time, it's the unfortunate thing that we have to do. You know, it's just how it is. She's a depressed woman. That is for sure, you know, how it is. And lonely. And in a really shitty situation. After dashing to her bedroom, Jessica answered the phone call that had been transferred there.
もしもし、お待たせ。バートラー、6年も音沙汰なしとはどういうつもりだ？
We're getting closer.
久しぶりだな。お、そうなのか？知るかよそんなの。うぜえぜ。じゃあ今年の親族会議はちゃんと来るわけだろ？ 6年ぶりだな。
Yes, 6 whole years where he was, you know, ignoring the family, doing his own thing, you know, discovering himself, whatever. 5 businessmen in expensive suits were visiting in the parlor, giving Kraus and Natsuhi a progress report on their business. Spread out on the table were the blueprints and designs for a building, as well as documents related to expenditures and the like. So packed that even a teacup would have gotten in the way. Officially, they were here to give Kraus a progress report. But in actuality, Kraus had called them all the way over to Rokkenjima so that Natsuhi could hear from them directly. This was because Natsuhi needed to hear someone other than her husband explain what condition their business was in. In other words, even though another family conference without Kinzo was approaching, their business had not yet earned them any money. After telling the guests to wait for a short while, Kraus took Natsuhi out into the hall and once again summarized the situation.
つまり我々の想像をはるかに超えて 事業は素晴らしくうまくいっていると彼らは言っているのだ。ここで私と知事との私的なコネクションが大きく効いてきた。もはや絶対に釣り落とすことはない。それどころか例の委任状だけでなく、これまでの損失さえも一気に取り戻すことが可能なくらいの大きな話になりつつあるのだ。
Kraus spoke passionately. This made it seem all the more suspicious to Natsuhi. But this time at least, she had to admit that everything really did seem to be going well. Certainly, this business that Kraus boasted of had expanded in scope over the last year, and was promising an even greater payoff than had been anticipated initially. Whether it would prove to be a winner or not, investors had gathered around it, and they were rapidly gaining funds. This must be what they mean when they say money summons money. Yeah, I haven't had that happen with me, you know? Well, kind of. I mean, if you find the right directions, I suppose. There's interest and, whatever else. 401ks and investing in, that sort of stuff, the stock market. And if you really just want to lose money, the crypto market. It was probably the greatest success of Kraus's life so far. It probably would be his greatest success yet. There we go. That point was where Natsuhi's misgivings lay. True, it was certain, and as Kraus had said, they wouldn't lose this catch now. However, the fish on the line had gotten too big.
必ず釣り上げられる魚だ。何も焦る必要はないのだよ。親父が生きていたなら、ぜひ見せて誇りたいほどの大成功なのだ。
ええ、それは分かっています。ですがあなたは昨年、私に約束したはずです。必ず1年で何とかできると。
Yeah, and we are definitely outside of a year. A pained look rose to Kraus's face. They certainly had hooked a fat fish that guaranteed great success. However, it would require an appropriate amount of time to reel it in. Natsuhi pressed Kraus, asking if there was any way for them to make money before this year's family conference. But Kraus kept saying that he needed just one more year. Kraus planned to use his unprecedented success to catapult them into further challenges in the future. Because of this, he didn't want to do anything that would raise suspicions by making it seem like they were rushing to get money. Certainly, fortune tends to turn against people who take it for granted even in the slightest. Anxious beggars never prosper. On many occasions before now, Kraus had gotten cold feet and sold off businesses that would surely have brought in a profit had he just waited, and had in effect given away his winning picks. Natsuhi also knew this. She knew that guts were the thing her husband lacked the most. That's why she was able to refuse when Kraus said that he wanted to prudently wait just one more year. I think I said it right the first time, or was going to. Oh well. English is just too hard. Hey, wait a minute, you're dead. I wonder, does it actually say it in the characters? I don't think it does. Yeah, it actually has him as, fully alive and everything.
ということはどうやら私はもうしばらくここで幽霊を続けねばならぬようだな。
まんざらでもなかろうが、そなたの命などこの世を去ればすぐに悪魔どもに食い尽くされる運命よ。
Yeah, Kinzo, you are going to hell.
申し訳ありません、お父様。また今年もお父様にはお休みいただけないかもしれません。
よい、気にするな夏日。後宮家当主はすでに私ではない。書斎の幽霊はおとなしく現在の当主の命令に従うべきだ。クラウスの資料は読ませてもらったが、なかなかに悪くない。
お父様からご覧になってもですか？
わらわから見てもなかなかのものよ。誰もが勝利を確信し、相当の魔力が集中している。その結果、さらに勝利が熱くなり、ますますに人と魔力を集め黄金を生み出そうとしている。錬金術の王道を見事に体現しているぞ。
おお、黄金の魔女の太鼓判までつくならこれは心強い。喜べ夏日。 このクラウスの事業は必ずや後ろ宮家の危機を救うだろう。
See, this is how you could tell that this is absolutely not Kinzo, because he would not be putting any sort of faith into Krause's shit.
ありがとうございます。そしてそのためにまた。
もう一度親族会議を乗り越えねばならんな。
Yep, but this is the big one.
ええ、昨年はうまくやり過ごせたつもりですが、不審に思う親族も現れるでしょう。今年は正念場になると思います。
去年の親族会議の時、ひょっとしたらもう一度同じことになるかもしれぬと予見したそなたは、
最悪のケースを想定するのは魔女ならずとも世渡りの基本だ。それで今年はどうする？
去年同様、会議当日はお父様の秘密を知る使用人を集中的に配置します。お父様の不在を気取る親族もすでにいるかもしれません。不用意な演出はむしろ馬脚を表す危険性もあります。
過ぎたるは及ばざるがごとしともなればどうする？
今年は昨年とは逆に最後まで書斎をお出にならないという筋書きでいこうと思います。
それがよかろうな。籠城は単純にして最後の切り札だ。
どれほど屋敷が毒素に満ちようとも、この部屋を密室結界に閉ざす限り金蔵の存在を否定することはできぬ。それはわらわも保証する。だが籠城すれば囲まれるは必至。
承知しています。それでも何とぞもう一度だけ。
私は新しき当主の命令には逆らえぬ。そして幽霊もまた聖者の命令には逆らえぬしな。
Well, that's the funny part there, Kinzo. There aren't any ghosts in existence, so I mean, there's no obeying or disobeying for you because you are not you.
この部屋から出るなというのであればそれに従おう。
ありがとうございます。
わらわは嫌だぞ。力を貸せと願われても願いごときでは聞いてやれぬ。
ええ、あなたは古文錬金術師ですから貸せと願いません。貸しなさいと命じます。あなたの魔法だけが頼りです。その力でもう一度だけお父様の幻想を。
Yes, and don't use that magic for literally anything else, please.
ならばよし、心得たぞ。そなたの貫禄、なかなかに心地よし。
Like literally nothing else, Beatrice. From the shadows of the study, Battler watched the exchange between these three.
なるほどな。そして今年の親族会議を迎えるわけだ。
And there's only one person in this room right now, by the way.
じいさまは不機嫌だからと書斎に閉じこもり、誰の前にも姿を現さない。
Natsuhi spoke boldly about how she would somehow overcome this year's crisis, and protect the Ushiromiya family's honor until the end, while Kinzo praised her, saying that her plan looked promising. Beato also praised her, saying that Natsuhi's dignified confidence was even more well-suited for the headship than Krause's. However, right now, the true number of people in this room was... Well, the moment I thought that, no, just because I thought it, Beato grabbed at her chest and moaned. I mean, come on.
安心しろ。
We all know it.
ここはゲーム版のまだ外だ。だから俺はそこにいるお前やじいさまを否定はしない。
But as soon as the game starts, you're going to be going through some pain, Beatrice. I put my hand on Beato's as she tried to hold back the pain deep inside her chest. I've already told Bernkastel. The 2-day period of the 1986 family conference is all I need to deny the illusion of the witch.
お前は前回全ゲームの開始時にじいさまが死んでることを赤で宣言した。しかしゲーム開始以前のじいさまの生死については言及していない。つまり今この場にじいさまが存在していても何の矛盾もないってわけだ。
I mean, sure, you can argue because, you know, the game hasn't started and we don't have any additional details. You know, just because of what we were shown in Lambda Delta's story, Kinzo could have been alive until like the day right before the family conference. My hand touching her let off a faint blue light, which seeped into her chest. That light tenderly wrapped itself around the splinters in Beato's chest.
そしてこの場にいるベアトリーチェの存在だって否定ゲーム版の外すなわち1986年10月4日以前の島の人数については赤で宣言されていないんだ。だからここにベアトリーチェが存在しても何もおかしいことはない。
Beato's expression softened slightly. My blue light slowly began to melt the red splinters that denied the illusion of the witch. Which, again, crazy contradictions here, man. Beato still wore the same sad expression, but she lifted her face and looked me straight in the eye. Though she was silent, her eyes told me that her pain had subsided. The feelings that showed in her eyes were gratitude for taking the pain away, and appreciation, or was it surprise, for leaving even a tiny bit of leeway for witches to exist. Unable to look directly at those pure eyes of hers, I reflexively averted my gaze.
誤解すんなよ。
Alright, you tsundere.
魔女の存在を認めたり、あるいは屈したつもりもねえ。俺はお前とのゲームに勝つために、その部分だけに徹してストイックに戦いたいってわけだぜ。ゲーム版の外でまで嫌がらせをするほど趣味は悪くねえからな。
I mean, yeah, his true feelings are probably that magic doesn't exist whatsoever. Magic, witches, all this crazy bullshit probably don't exist. However, he is now narrowing it down just to this weekend, the event that is the family conference in 1986. So they could exist, is what he's trying to say probably, or what he's trying to go with now. And he's gone through a lot of crazy stuff here in the afterlife, or whatever the fuck this is. However, I guess the argument has now changed to that there were no witches, magic, or anything in the murders that took place in this crazy-ass event. It had to have been from a person. Beato hung her head. I was still facing away from her. However, we waited wordlessly, for a while, my hand still on hers. By now, no one would believe that this sad-eyed woman was the same person as that prideful Beato. So I asked once more. Even though I said it aloud, it wasn't a question to her. I was asking myself.
お前は一体何を考えていたんだ。そうさ、俺はラムダデルタのゲームを通じてでもお前を探さなくちゃならない。お前が何を考え、何をしようとしていたのかもな。
Very soon, this game will also reach October 4th, 1986. The fifth game will finally begin. And this time, I will reach the end. The end of that journey. Uh-huh.
殺人がとか、トリックがとか、そういう上辺だけじゃない。お前が。黄金の魔女ベアトリーチェが何を考え何のためにそうしたのか、何を望んでいたのか、それをたどる。
That's right. I already know how I can reach the end of that journey. It's been made clear to me since the very beginning.
今こそチェス盤をひっくり返そう。
Oh, there it is.
この物語を俺側からじゃなく、お前側からの目線で。そして今度こそお前を理解しよう。そしてお前の心臓にたどり着く。痛みなんか感じさせない。安心しろ。あの魔女どものおもちゃになどもうこれ以上させないからな。
Beato looked up at me again and gave a small nod. That's right. The position of Game Master might have been snatched up by Lambda Delta. However, as long as I continue this contest with the intent of fighting against Beato, our fight will continue no matter who controls the game board. Very soon, the curtain will rise on our game. Alright. I think we'll wrap it up on that part there, as we slowly but surely approach the true beginning of the game. Very interesting direction we're heading with everything this time around. The servant's secret, what they believed in, the whole wavelengths idea that we learned about, I think in episode 1 or 2, one of those. You know, it's kind of come down to, you know, now it's just, we have to, you pretend as if Kinzo was still alive. And that is just so interesting. The human mind is quite an interesting thing overall, and what you can utilize with it, along with other people, to create a group perception is pretty wild to consider. But we'll wrap it up there. Thank you all for tuning in. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, all that fancy jazz, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take it easy.